"This old junk isn't worth anything," said the millionaire until the mechanic did something incredible. Emily Johnson had grease up to her elbows when she heard the powerful rumble of an imported engine pulling into the garage's yard. She didn't even need to look up to know it was an expensive car. The sound was different from the vehicles that usually showed up there in that working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Sacramento. That's when the strange noise started, a metallic screech that made even the newcomer shut off the engine immediately. "Is anyone there?" The male voice sounded impatient. Emily wiped her hands on the rag she carried in her pocket and came out from under the beetle she was fixing. The midday sun hit her eyes hard, but she managed to see the silhouette of a tall man in an impeccable suit standing next to a silver imported pickup truck worth more than her entire garage. "How can I help you, sir?" she replied, walking toward him. The man looked her up and down with an expression Emily knew well. It was that look of someone who didn't expect to see a woman working on engines, especially a young woman. "Is the owner in?" he asked, completely ignoring her response. "I am the owner." Emily kept her tone professional, even as she felt irritation rising. "How can I help you?" "You?" He raised an eyebrow. "Look, I don't want to be rude, but I need someone who actually understands mechanics. My car started making a strange noise." Emily took a deep breath. It wasn't the first time she'd heard something like that, and it probably wouldn't be the last. "Sir, I grew up in this garage. I learned to take apart an engine before I learned to read. You can rest assured I'll take a look." The man hesitated, but the engine noise seemed to worry him enough to agree. Emily lifted the hood and started examining it while he stood by, arms crossed, clearly suspicious. "When did the noise start?" she asked without taking her eyes off the engine. "About 3 kilometers back. Everything was normal and suddenly this screeching started." Emily picked up a tool and tapped some parts, listening carefully. The diagnosis was simple, but the client didn't seem like the type who would easily accept an opinion from her. "It's the alternator belt," she finally said. "It's starting to wear out. If you don't replace it soon, it'll leave you stranded somewhere. I have the part here. I can replace it in 40 minutes. The man seemed surprised by the speed and certainty of the diagnosis. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Emily replied. "Do you want me to do it, or would you rather take it somewhere else?" He looked around the garage, clearly assessing whether he'd trust his expensive car to this place. That's when his eyes stopped on something in the corner of the yard. "My God," he murmured, walking toward the back of the garage. "What is that?" Emily followed his gaze and felt her heart tighten. In the corner of the yard, half hidden by a torn tarp and covered in dust, was the old red pickup truck that had belonged to her father. "It's a pickup truck," she replied, her voice coming out harsher than she intended. "I can see that," he said, approaching the vehicle. "But what is this junk doing here? This should have been in a scrapyard years ago." Emily felt anger rising in her chest. That man knew nothing about that pickup truck. He didn't know the stories her father told, the trips they took together, the dreams he had of restoring it one day. "That pickup truck has more history than you imagine," she said, keeping her voice steady. "History?" He laughed, a humorless sound. "That's scrap metal. Look at the state of the bodywork, the broken headlights. The engine must be completely seized. Honestly, you're taking up valuable space in your yard with this thing." Emily clenched her fists. Her father had passed away just 4 months ago, and the pain was still too fresh. That pickup truck was one of the last things he had touched before he got sick. "This pickup truck is worth more than any brand new vehicle you could buy," she said. "Worth?" The man turned to her with a sarcastic smile. "Sentimental value maybe, but real worth. This old hunk of junk isn't even worth the cost of the tow truck to haul it away." "You don't understand anything about real value," Emily retorted. "No?" He crossed his arms, clearly amused by the situation. "Then explain it to me. How much do you think this scrap heap is worth?" Emily knew she was being baited, but she couldn't help herself. "More than you could afford." The man let out a loud laugh. "You know what? You've got guts, I'll give you that. So here's what we'll do. Since you're so confident about this old heap," he pointed at the pickup truck, "let's make a bet." "What kind of bet?" Emily asked, suspicious. "Simple. If you can get this junker running in 1 week, 7 days from now, I'll pay double for the repair on my car. And I'll even buy this pickup for whatever price you ask." Emily felt her heart race. She knew the state of the pickup. Her father had spent the last few years collecting parts, but he never had the time or money to finish the restoration. "And if I can't?" she asked. "Then you fix my car for free," he extended his hand. "And to show I'm not so bad, I'll even pay for the tow to get this scrap out of your yard. Do we have a deal?" Emily looked at the outstretched hand. She desperately needed the money. The garage bills were overdue. The bank was about to foreclose on the debt her father had left. The extra money from the bet could save her from eviction, but 7 days to get that pickup running. She didn't even know if it was possible. "Emily, don't take this," a raspy voice came from behind her. Old Walter, the only employee at the garage, a 65-year-old man who had worked there since before Emily was born, approached with a slight limp. He had a knee problem that got worse on cold days. "Old Walter," Emily began, but he cut her off. "You don't know what you're doing. That pickup has been sitting for over 3 years. The engine is probably seized solid, parts are missing, the electrical system is all shot." "I know that," Emily said, "but I have to try." "Why?" "Because of some taunt from this guy." Old Walter looked at the man in the suit with disapproval. "It's not worth it." Emily looked at the red pickup, then at the man waiting for her answer, with a smug smile on his face. "I accept," she said, and shook his hand before she could regret it. "Excellent," the man said. "My name is Thomas Wilson, by the way. I own Wilson Construction. And you are?" "Emily Johnson." "Well, Emily Johnson, I hope you know what you're doing." He took out a wallet and handed her a card. "This is my number. Call me when the pickup is ready or when you give up." "I won't give up," Emily said, taking the card. "We'll see." Thomas got back into his imported car. "Oh, and about my car's belt, I'll take it somewhere else. I don't want to interfere with your work on the junker." He got in the vehicle and drove out of the yard, leaving Emily standing there with the card in her hand and a huge weight in her chest. "Have you lost your mind?" Old Walter shook his head. 7 days. Emily, you couldn't do it in a month." "I have to try," Emily said, looking at the pickup. "You know I need the money." "I know, but this isn't the solution. You'll work yourself to death and still won't succeed, and then you'll have to fix that show-off's car for free." Emily knew old Walter was right, but something inside her couldn't accept defeat without even trying. "Mom!" A child's voice came from the small office at the back of the garage. Emily turned and saw her 5-year-old daughter, Lucy, running toward her with a drawing in her hand. The girl had her blonde hair tied in 2 braids and a smile that lit up any room. "Look what I drew!" Lucy proudly showed the paper. It was a drawing of a garage with colorful cars and 2 figures that were clearly Emily and her. "It's beautiful, sweetie." Emily picked up her daughter, even with her hands dirty with grease. "Why are you sad?" Lucy asked, touching her mother's face. "I'm not sad, just worried about work." "Is it because of Grandpa's pickup truck?" The girl looked at the red vehicle in the corner of the yard. "How do you know that?" "I heard you and old Walter talking. Are you going to fix it?" Emily looked at her daughter, then at the pickup truck. Lucy was only 1 year old when her grandfather had passed away. She barely remembered him, but always asked about the man in the photos that Emily kept in the office. "I'll try," Emily said. "I know you can do it." Lucy hugged her mother's neck. "You can fix anything." Emily felt her eyes well up, but blinked hard to hold back the tears. She needed to be strong, for herself, for her daughter, for her father's memory. "Let's get something to eat," she said, taking Lucy back to the office. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of work. Emily finished repairing the Beetle, changed the oil of a compact car, adjusted the brakes of a motorcycle. Each job gave her a few dollars, but never enough to cover all the expenses. When the sun began to set, old Walter approached her. "I'm heading out," he said. "My wife isn't feeling well. I need to take her to the doctor early tomorrow." "All right, old Walter, take care," Emily said. "You too, kid." He hesitated before continuing. "About that bet. If you need help, call me, even if it's the middle of the night." "Thank you." Emily smiled weakly. After he left, Emily locked the gate of the garage and took Lucy to the small apartment above the establishment. It was simple, just one bedroom, a small living room, kitchen and bathroom, but it was what they had. After dinner and putting Lucy to sleep, Emily returned to the garage. She turned on the yard lights and walked to the red pickup truck. Up close, the damage was even more evident. The paint was peeling, the headlights broken, the tires flat. Emily wiped the dust off the windshield and peered inside. The interior was in tatters. The seat was torn, the steering wheel cracked, buttons were missing from the dashboard. She walked around the vehicle, assessing every detail. She tried to open the hood, but it was stuck. After a few minutes of forcing it, she finally managed to lift it. The engine was covered in dirt and rust. Several parts were missing, others clearly broken. Emily grabbed a flashlight and began a more detailed inspection. The family's golden dog, Duke, approached and sat beside her. He was a 6-year-old golden retriever who had been her father's inseparable companion. Since he had passed, Duke spent his nights in the garage, as if waiting for him to return. "What do you think, Duke?" Emily stroked the animal's head. "Do you think we can do it?" Duke tilted his head, as if really considering the question. Emily spent the next 2 hours mentally cataloguing what she would need to do. The list was daunting. Seized engine, damaged electrical system, compromised suspension, stuck transmission, non-existent brakes, stiff steering. It was impossible to do all this in 7 days, especially working alone and still having to serve the garage's other customers. But she had made a promise, and Emily Johnson didn't give up easily. She closed the hood and looked at the starry sky. The night was cold, typical of October in Northern California. "Dad, if you're watching me from somewhere, I could use a little help," she murmured. The cold wind brought no answer, only rustled the trees around the garage. Emily went back to the apartment, took a quick shower, and lay down beside her daughter. But sleep didn't come. Her mind wouldn't stop working, calculating, planning, trying to find a solution to the impossible challenge she had accepted. At 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleeping. She threw a robe over her pajamas and went back down to the garage. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Emily turned on the yard lights again and went straight to the pickup truck. If she was going to do this, she needed to start immediately. She had no time to waste. She opened the hood again and began taking apart the engine. The work was slow and meticulous. Every part had to be removed carefully, cleaned, assessed. Duke remained by her side all night like a silent guardian. When the sun rose, Emily already had the engine completely disassembled on a tarp on the floor. The parts were organized, cleaned, and she had a clearer idea of the damage. It was worse than she had imagined. The engine block was seized with rust. The pistons were stuck. The crankshaft needed to be replaced. Several cylinder head components were damaged beyond repair. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. How was she going to get parts for such an old engine in less than a week? "Mom?" Lucy's sleepy voice came from the doorway. "Why are you down here?" Emily looked at her daughter, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Honey, go back upstairs. It's too cold down here. But I want to stay with you." "Lucy, please, Mom. I promise I won't get in the way." Emily sighed. She knew it was useless to argue when her daughter made that face. "Okay, but put on a sweater. And don't touch anything, it's dangerous." Lucy ran upstairs and came back wearing a huge sweatshirt that went down to her knees. She sat in an old chair in the corner, hugging Duke, and stayed there watching her mother work. Old Walter arrived around 9 o'clock. He looked at Emily, at the parts scattered on the floor, and shook his head. "You didn't sleep, did you?" "I did sleep," Emily lied. "Emily, look at you. You have dark circles under your eyes. Your hands are shaking from exhaustion. This isn't going to work." "I have no choice, old Walter." He sighed heavily. "At least let me help." "And your wife?" "The doctor." "I already came back from there. She's better. It was just a bad flu. The doctor prescribed some medicine and she's resting at home now. So, put this old man to work." Emily felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you." They worked side by side the rest of the morning. Old Walter had experience that only decades in a garage could give. He looked at a part and knew exactly what was wrong. "This piston here is beyond repair," he said, showing a corroded part. You'll have to get a new one." "I know," Emily replied. "Actually, I'm going to need a lot of new parts." "And where are you going to get the money for that?" Emily had thought about that during her sleepless night. "I'm going to use what I have saved to pay the bank." "Are you crazy?" Old Walter stared at her. "If you don't pay the bank, they'll take the garage. If I don't get the pickup truck running, I'll have to fix that imported car for free. That will cost almost as much as I have saved. At least this way, I have a chance to earn double and pay for everything." Old Walter didn't seem convinced, but he didn't argue anymore. During the afternoon, Emily called her used parts supplier, a man named Josh, who had a junkyard on the outskirts of town. "Hello, Josh. It's Emily from Johnson's Garage." "Emily, how are you, girl?" It's been a while since you've been around here." "Yeah, it has." "Listen, I urgently need parts for an old pickup truck. Do you have them?" "It depends. What's the model?" Emily described the pickup and listed the parts she needed. "Hold on. Let me check here." She heard the sound of papers being shuffled. "Look, I have some of these parts, but it'll take a few days for me to sort and clean them. About 2 weeks, maybe." 2 weeks? Emily's heart sank. "Josh, I need these parts in 3 days at most." 3 days? Emily, that's impossible. These parts are old, hard to find. I'll have to scour the entire junkyard. Please, Josh, it's urgent. I'll pay double." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Double?" "That's right. Are you in some kind of trouble, Emily?" "Let's just say I made a bet I shouldn't have." Josh laughed. "Your father was like that too, always taking on crazy challenges." "All right, I'll figure something out, but I'm not promising anything, okay? Thank you, Josh, really." After hanging up, Emily went back to work. The next 2 days were a blur of physical and mental effort. She and old Walter worked non-stop, cleaning parts, unsticking components, improvising solutions. Lucy stayed nearby during the day, drawing, playing with Duke, sometimes helping in small ways, like fetching tools or holding a flashlight. The nights were the worst. Emily worked alone, with only Duke as company. Old Walter insisted on going home to sleep, but she couldn't stop. Every hour lost was one less hour to complete the challenge. On the morning of the 3rd day, Emily was welding a broken part when she heard the sound of a car in the yard. She turned off the torch and lifted her welding mask. A man in a grey suit was getting out of a black car. He looked around with a disapproving expression. "Emily Johnson?" he asked. "Yes, that's me." "My name is Harold Fields. I'm a representative of Progress Bank. I've come to discuss the garage's debt." Emily felt her stomach turn. She knew this conversation would come eventually, but she didn't expect it so soon. "I know about the debt, Mr. Fields. I'm working to pay it off." "Yes, well, that's what I came to talk about." He opened a folder. "We conducted an audit of the records and found some irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "Your father, God rest his soul, didn't declare some income in the months before he passed. This violates the terms of the loan agreement." "But I didn't even know about that," Emily said, feeling panic rise. "I wasn't the one who made the contract." "I understand, but the debt is in the garage's name, which now belongs to you. Because of these irregularities, the bank has decided to shorten the repayment deadline." "Shorten? To when?" 15 days from today. Emily felt her legs weaken. She had at least 2 months before the original due date. How was she going to manage to pay everything in 15 days? "That's not fair," she said, her voice trembling. "My father was sick. He didn't—" "I understand your situation, Miss Johnson. Truly," Harold said, and he seemed sincere. "But I'm not the one making these decisions. I'm just the messenger. If payment isn't made in 15 days, the bank will begin the debt enforcement process. And what does that mean? It means the garage will be auctioned off to cover the debt." Emily stood there, speechless, as Harold returned to his car and drove away. "Mom?" Lucy appeared at her side. "Who was that man?" "No one important, sweetie," Emily lied, taking her daughter's hand. "But he was very important. It was the end of everything." Old Walter approached, worried. "What did he want?" "They shortened the debt deadline. I have 15 days to pay or I lose the garage." "My God." Old Walter rubbed his face. What now? Now I work faster, Emily said, heading back to the pickup. Because this bet is no longer about pride. Now it's about survival. She worked like never before in the following days. She slept 2, sometimes 3 hours a night. She ate just enough to get by. Every muscle in her body ached. Her hands were covered in cuts and calluses, but she didn't stop. Josh finally showed up on the 4th day with some of the parts she had asked for. I managed to find these, he said, unloading boxes from the truck. But, Emily, there are still many parts missing. Honestly, I don't know if I'll get the rest in time. Emily looked at the parts. It was better than nothing, but far from enough. Keep looking, Josh, please. You got it. That night, while installing the parts Josh had brought, Old Walter approached her. Emily, I need to tell you something. What is it? My wife. She's not well. It wasn't just a flu. The doctor wants to run some more detailed tests. Really? Emily stopped what she was doing. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you already have enough problems, he replied. But I'll need to take a few days off to go with her for the tests. It could be something serious. Emily felt a pang of guilt. Here she was, worried about a silly bet, while old Walter was facing something much more important. Stay with her, Emily said. Family comes first. But what about the truck? I'll manage. Emily, go, old Walter. Your wife needs you. I'll be fine. But she wasn't fine. On the 5th day, working alone, Emily realized she wasn't going to make it. It was simply impossible. Crucial parts were missing, time was running out, and she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. That's when the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor, appeared at the garage with a meal. Girl, you need to eat, she said, placing the food on the small office table. Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor, but No buts. You're going to sit here and eat all of this. I've seen you these past days working non-stop. You're going to get sick like this. Emily didn't have the strength to argue. She sat and ate while Mrs. Eleanor watched with approval. That truck there, the elderly woman pointed to the red vehicle. It has a story, doesn't it? It does, Emily confirmed. It was my father's. Jack was a good man. He always helped me when I needed it. When my late husband had that problem with the car, your father fixed it for free, said he wouldn't charge a widow. Emily smiled. That was just like her father. And Lucy? Mrs. Eleanor asked. Where is she? Sleeping upstairs. You can't go on like this, Emily. Working all night with a small child, sleeping alone in the apartment. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do, Mrs. Eleanor said firmly. Starting today, Lucy will sleep at my house. That way you can work without worry, and I won't take no for an answer. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. It was the first time in days that someone had offered real, concrete help. Thank you, she managed to say. Thank you so much. No need to thank me. It's what neighbors do. Mrs. Eleanor gave her shoulder a gentle pat. Now finish that food and get back to work. That night, with Lucy sleeping safely at Mrs. Eleanor's house, Emily worked with renewed energy. She was no longer alone. There were people who cared, who believed in her. But on the 6th day, while soldering part of the electrical wiring, disaster struck. A spark fell into a puddle of oil she hadn't seen. The fire spread quickly. Shit! Emily yelled, grabbing the fire extinguisher. She managed to put out the fire quickly, but the damage was done. All the electrical wiring she had spent 2 days repairing was damaged. She would have to start from scratch. Emily fell to her knees right there on the dirty garage floor and finally let the tears fall. It was too much. Everything was too much. I can't do it, she sobbed. Dad, I can't. Duke approached and laid his head on her lap, as if understanding her pain. Emily stayed there for long minutes, just crying, letting all the frustration and exhaustion pour out. Then, slowly, she stood up. She still had 1 day, a whole day. She wasn't going to give up now. That's when Duke started barking. An insistent bark, different from his usual one. What is it, Duke? Emily asked. The dog ran to the corner of the yard where there was a small shed her father used to store old tools. Duke scratched at the door, barking non-stop. Okay. Emily opened the door. The shed was dark and dusty. Emily hadn't been in there for months. Her father always said he kept important things there. But after he passed, she never had the courage to go through them. Duke ran inside and stopped in front of an old shelf. He kept barking. "What's in there?" Emily approached. There were old boxes, rusty tools, ancient paint cans, nothing that seemed useful. But Duke wouldn't stop barking. Emily started removing the boxes, searching for what could be making the dog so agitated. That's when she saw, at the back of the shelf, a wooden box with her name engraved on the lid. With trembling hands, she picked up the box and opened it. Inside were engine parts, all carefully packaged and labeled, and on top of everything, a letter. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Emily picked up the letter with trembling fingers. It was her father's handwriting, unmistakable. "My dear Emily," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone and you're trying to restore the pickup truck. I always knew you'd do this one day. You're as stubborn as I am. These parts here are the original ones from the pickup truck. I spent years collecting them one by one. Each label has instructions on how to assemble them. Follow them carefully. But there's one thing you need to know about this pickup truck. It's not just any vehicle. It has a story I never told you. Many years ago, when I was just starting with the garage, a rich man showed up here. He wanted to sell this pickup truck because he was having financial trouble. He said it belonged to his father, who had just passed away, and that he needed money fast. I bought it for a fair price. The man was young, probably in his early 20s. He cried when he left. He said that pickup truck was the last thing he had from his father. He made me promise that one day, when he had the means, I would return it to the family. I promised. But the years passed and he never showed up again. The pickup truck stayed here, waiting. I always intended to restore it, to return it one day, but time passed, and I never managed to. That man's name was in a letter he left inside the pickup truck. It's here in the box with the parts. Look for it. Emily, if you're restoring this pickup truck, whatever the reason, know that it's not just for me. It's to fulfill a promise I made a long time ago. With all my love, your father. Emily had to sit on the floor. Her legs couldn't support her anymore. Tears were flowing freely now, but they were different tears. They were tears of hope. She searched through the box and found an envelope yellowed with age. Inside was an old photo and a handwritten letter. The photo showed an older man next to the red pickup truck, still new and shiny. He was smiling, his arm resting on the vehicle's hood. On the back of the photo was written, "Joseph Wilson with his faithful companion, 1978. Wilson. The same last name as Thomas, the man from the bet. Emily opened the letter. It was addressed to her father. "Mr. Jack, I know we don't know each other well, but I'm in a desperate situation. My father passed away 3 months ago and left many debts. I'm selling everything I can to try to pay, but it's not being enough. This pickup truck was my father's faithful companion for over 20 years. He built everything we have by hauling goods in it, but now I need to sell it. I know you'll take good care of it. I've seen how you care for vehicles at your garage. Please, if I ever get the chance, I'd like to buy it back. I know it's a lot to ask, but this truck is the last connection I have with my father. The money you're giving me will help pay for the doctors and the funeral. My father deserved a proper burial. I promise I'll come back one day. It might take years, but I'll return. With gratitude, Thomas Wilson." Emily stood there, absorbing the information. Thomas Wilson, the arrogant man who had made the bet with her, was the same desperate young man who had sold the pickup truck decades ago. And he didn't even remember, or pretended not to remember. Emily looked at the parts in the box. Now everything made sense. Her father wasn't just storing an old truck, he was keeping a promise and waiting for the day he could fulfill it. "Duke," Emily petted the dog, "you knew, didn't you? You saw my father storing this here." Duke just looked at her with his intelligent brown eyes. Emily picked up the box and brought it closer to the truck. It was almost 3 in the morning, but she no longer felt tired. She had a mission now. It wasn't just about winning a bet or saving the garage. It was about fulfilling the promise her father didn't have time to keep. She opened the first tag. Her father's handwriting described in detail how to install that specific part, with small drawings and notes. Emily worked all night following the instructions. It was as if her father were there, guiding her hands, teaching each step. When the sun began to rise on the 7th day, she had progressed more in one night than in the last 2 days combined. Old Walter appeared early, before 7. "How's your wife?" Emily asked immediately. "They're going to do some more detailed tests next week, but the doctors think it's nothing serious. Maybe just a hormonal issue." He seemed relieved. "And you? Did you manage to rest?" Emily looked at him and smiled, a tired but determined smile. "I found the missing parts." "What do you mean?" She told him about the box, about her father's letter, about discovering the true story of the truck. Old Walter listened to everything in silence, his eyes moist. "Your father was a man of his word," he finally said. "He mentioned this truck to me once, about the promise he had made. But I never imagined—" "That the Thomas Wilson from the bet was the same man from the letter," Emily completed. "Neither did I." "And what are you going to do?" "I'm going to finish the truck, and I'm going to return it to him, as my father promised." "But what about the bet, the money?" Emily was silent for a moment, thinking. "The bet still stands, but now it has a different meaning." The two worked side by side all day. Mrs. Eleanor appeared mid-morning with Lucy, who was excited and rested. "Mom, Mrs. Eleanor made pancakes for breakfast," the girl said enthusiastically. "That's great, sweetie. And she said I can sleep over again tonight if you want." Emily looked at Mrs. Eleanor with gratitude. "If it's not a bother—" "No bother at all. The house has been so quiet since my Anthony passed. It's good to have a child around again." During the afternoon, while Emily was working on the electrical part, a car stopped in the yard. She didn't need to look to know who it was. She recognized the sound of the engine. Thomas Wilson got out of the imported car, accompanied by 2 men in suits. "I came to see how the progress is," he said with a mocking smile. "Or rather, the lack of it." Emily didn't respond. She continued working on the wiring. "I just look still trying," one of the men with Thomas commented, laughing. "Didn't you say it was impossible?" "I did," Thomas confirmed, "but I let her try anyway. It'll be fun to see her face when she has to fix my car for free." Emily clenched her teeth but didn't look up. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her angry. "But seriously," Thomas approached, "you still have today and half of tomorrow. Wouldn't it be better to just give up and start working on my car? At least that way you save energy." That's when old Walter approached. "You can leave now," he said, his voice firm. "Emily is working." "Oh yeah? And who are you?" "I've been an employee at this garage for 40 years. I've seen many people like you come through here, people who think money gives them the right to disrespect others." "Disrespect?" Thomas seemed genuinely surprised. "I'm not disrespecting anyone. I just made a bet. She's the one who accepted." "A bet that you knew was almost impossible to fulfill," old Walter retorted. "That's not a fair bet." "Nothing in life is fair, old man. The sooner your boss learns that, the better." Emily finally looked up. "I don't need to learn anything from you," she said calmly. "And you're wrong about many things." "Really? Like what?" Emily was about to tell him about the letter, about the pickup truck's history, but something made her stop. It wasn't the right time. Not yet. "You'll find out soon," she simply said, returning to work. Thomas stood there for a few more minutes, clearly waiting for a stronger reaction, but when Emily continued to ignore him, he finally left. "That man is unbearable," old Walter murmured. "Yeah," Emily agreed. "But there's more to him than meets the eye." The rest of the day passed at a frantic pace. Emily and old Walter worked until they couldn't anymore. When night fell, old Walter went home, but Emily continued. She had to finish. She had to keep her father's promise. The hours passed. Emily installed each part following the detailed instructions left by her father. It was a labor of love, every bolt tightened carefully, every connection checked twice. Duke stayed by her side all night, sometimes sleeping, sometimes just watching, as if he knew the importance of that moment. It was 4 in the morning when Emily installed the last part. The engine was assembled, the electrical system was complete, the transmission was in place. Now came the scary part. Would it work? Emily wiped her hands, said a silent prayer, and got into the pickup truck's cab. The interior was still in shambles, but that didn't matter now. What mattered was the engine. She put the key in the ignition, her hands were shaking. "Please," she murmured. "Please work." She turned the key. Nothing. Tried again. Nothing. Emily felt panic starting to rise. She had followed all the instructions. She had installed everything correctly. Why wasn't it working? She got out of the cab and opened the hood again. She checked every connection, every cable, every hose. Everything seemed correct. Then she saw it. A single battery connection was loose. Something so simple. Emily tightened the connector and returned to the cab. She took a deep breath and turned the key one more time. The engine coughed once, twice, and then caught. The wonderful roar of a perfectly running engine filled the early morning silence. Emily started laughing and crying at the same time. She had done it. She had really done it. Duke barked happily, as if celebrating with her. Emily let the engine warm up for a few minutes, listening to the steady, strong sound. Then, carefully, she pressed the clutch and shifted into first gear. The transmission worked perfectly. She released the clutch slowly, and the pickup truck moved just a few feet, but it moved. Emily Johnson parked the vehicle back and turned off the engine. She sat there, still in the cab, just soaking in the moment. She had 7 hours to clean the pickup truck and make it presentable for Thomas Wilson. The engine worked, but the exterior was still dirty and beat up. Emily worked non-stop. She washed every inch of the body, cleaned the windows, vacuumed the interior. There was no way to fix the torn seats or the peeling paint in such a short time, but at least the vehicle was clean. When the sun rose, revealing the red pickup truck in all its imperfect glory, Emily felt a wave of pride. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was running, and that was what mattered. Old Walter arrived at 8 and stopped in the middle of the yard, mouth agape. "You did it," he said, incredulous. "You really did it." "We did it," Emily corrected. Mrs. Eleanor appeared with Lucy shortly after. The girl ran to the pickup truck with shining eyes. "Mum, it's beautiful, just like in Grandpa's photos." "Thank you, sweetie." The hours passed slowly. As Thomas had said he would return at noon to see the result. Emily used that time to organize everything, gather the documents her father had kept, prepare what she was going to say. At noon sharp, Thomas's imported car entered the yard. This time he was accompanied by even more people. He had clearly brought an audience to witness Emily's failure. She watched as he got out of the car, the smug smile already formed on his face. But when his eyes landed on the pickup truck, the smile disappeared. "This is," he began, but didn't finish the sentence. Emily walked over to the pickup truck and placed her hand on the still warm hood. "Do you want to hear the engine?" she asked. Thomas just nodded, as if he didn't trust his own voice. Emily got into the cab, turned the ignition, and the engine started immediately, purring softly. The silence that followed was absolute. All the men Thomas had brought to mock were now quiet, impressed. Emily turned off the engine and got out of the pickup truck. She took the envelope with the documents and photographs her father had kept and walked over to Thomas. "There's something I need to show you," she said. Thomas took the envelope with slightly trembling hands. He took out the old photo and stared at it for a long time. "This is," he murmured, "this is my grandfather." "Joseph Wilson," Emily confirmed. "He owned this pickup truck, and you sold it to my father over 20 years ago." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Thomas looked at Emily, clear confusion on his face. "How do you know this?" Emily handed him the letter he himself had written decades ago. Thomas read it slowly, and with each line, his face grew paler. I didn't remember," he said, his voice low. "It was so long ago. I was so desperate back then." "My father kept this pickup truck all these years," Emily explained. "He made a promise to return it to your family one day. He never had the chance to fulfill it before he passed away, but he left everything prepared so I could do it for him." Thomas kept looking at the pickup truck, and Emily could see emotions passing over his face. Surprise, shame, sadness. "My grandfather," he began, his voice faltering. He started with nothing. He came from the countryside of Louisiana to Los Angeles with only the clothes on his back and a dream. He worked as a loader, a bricklayer, whatever came up. He stopped, running his hand through his hair. When he managed to buy this pickup truck, it was the happiest day of his life. He said it was the beginning of everything. And it was. He transported everything with it: fruits, furniture, construction materials. He worked day and night, weekends, holidays. Thomas approached the pickup truck, touching its bodywork carefully, as if touching something sacred. He built everything with it: the first house, the first shed, the first store. Every penny he earned passed through his hands, but it started here with this pickup. Then why did he sell it? One of the men accompanying him asked. Thomas turned, and Emily could see tears in his eyes. Because I was a fool, he said simply. My grandfather had just passed away, leaving many medical bills. My father had died years earlier, so I was the only man in the family. I was 23 and didn't know what to do. He quickly wiped his eyes, as if ashamed of the tears. I sold everything: the house I grew up in, the furniture, my grandfather's tools, and this pickup. I managed to pay off the debts and had a little left. I used that money to start a small building materials business. It worked out, it grew, and here I am. But you forgot where you came from, old Walter said, not as an accusation, but as a statement. I didn't forget, Thomas retorted, but then stopped. No, that's a lie. I did forget. Or rather, I wanted to forget. I built this new life, this image of a successful businessman, and I didn't want anyone to know that I started by selling my dead grandfather's things to pay off debts. He looked at Emily. When I arrived here last week and saw this pickup, I didn't recognize it, or pretended not to. It was so dirty, so damaged, that it was easy to ignore, easier than admitting what it represented. And the bet? Emily asked. Why did you do that? Thomas lowered his eyes. Honestly, because you annoyed me. Here you were, a young woman, defending an old piece of junk as if it were a treasure. It reminded me of things I wanted to forget. So I made the bet thinking you would fail, and when you did, I could feel justified in having sold the pickup years ago. There was a long silence. Emily didn't know what to say. Part of her was furious with Thomas for his arrogance, for the way he had treated her. But another part felt sorry for him for carrying that shame for so long. The bet, Thomas finally said. You won, fair and square. I'll pay double for my car repair, even though you didn't do it. And I'll buy the pickup for whatever price you ask. Emily shook her head. I'm not selling. What? Thomas seemed shocked. But that was the agreement. The agreement was that you would buy it if I got the pickup running. And I did. But I didn't say I would sell it. Then what do you want? Emily took her father's letter and read the relevant part aloud. My father promised to return this pickup to your family, not sell it, return it. I don't understand. This pickup is yours, Emily said clearly. It belongs to your family. My father was just keeping it until you were ready to have it back. Thomas stared at her as if she had spoken in another language. You're saying you're going to give me the pickup? I'm saying it was always yours. I'm just fulfilling my father's promise. But you need the money. I know your garage is in trouble. Emily smiled, a tired but genuine smile. Some things are more important than money. My father taught me that. He could have sold this pickup dozens of times over the years, but he didn't, because he had made a promise. And a man is only as good as his word. Thomas stood there, motionless, processing. Then, slowly, he turned to his companions. You can go, he said. All of you leave. But Thomas, I said leave. The men left, murmuring among themselves, clearly confused. When they were alone, just Emily, Thomas, old Walter, Mrs. Eleanor, and Lucy, Thomas turned back to the pickup. He walked up to her, and to everyone's surprise hugged the hood, and then he started to cry. Not a delicate cry, but a deep cry of years of repressed emotions. I spent my whole life trying to forget who I was, he said between sobs. Ashamed of having been poor, of having lived in a two-room house, of having worn patched clothes. I built this image of a successful businessman and hid everything about my origins. Emily approached, but said nothing. She just let him talk. My grandfather was a simple man. He could barely write, but he was honest, hard-working, and loved his family above all else. And what did I do? I sold everything he built, everything he loved, because I was ashamed to be associated with poverty. He wiped his face with his hands. When he was in the hospital in his final days, he made me promise I would take care of the pickup truck. He said it was special, that it had history, but I didn't keep my word. I sold it at the first opportunity. But now you have a second chance, Emily said softly. Thomas looked at her, his eyes red. I don't deserve this. Maybe not, but it's yours anyway. That's what my father wanted. That's what your grandfather wanted. Thomas took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He grabbed a handkerchief and wiped his face. I'll still pay the bet, he said, his voice firmer now. Double for the car repair, even though you didn't do it. And more. How much do you owe the bank? Emily hesitated. Why do you want to know? Because I'm going to pay it, Thomas said simply. All the garage's debts. I want it to be cleared. I can't accept that. You can and you will, he insisted. It's not charity, it's the least I can do. Your father kept my inheritance for over 20 years, didn't charge anything for it, took care of it as if it were his own. If I pay off your debts, I'll still be in debt to your family. Emily looked at old Walter, who gave a slight nod. All right, she finally said, but with one condition. What is it? I want to form a partnership. You provide the capital to modernize the garage, buy new equipment, hire more people. In return, you get 30% of the profits. I continue to manage everything. We still serve the community, but under better conditions. Thomas thought for a moment. 20%, he said. You do all the work, you keep most of the profits, and the garage keeps the name Johnson. It's your father's name, it has to be preserved. Emily extended her hand. Deal made. They shook hands, and this time there was no arrogance or distrust, just mutual respect. And the pickup truck, Thomas said. I'm not taking it away. I want it to stay here, at the entrance of the garage, as a kind of monument, to remind us where we came from, you and I, and to remind us that some things are more important than money or status. Emily smiled. I think my father would have liked that. I'm sure your grandfather would have too, old Walter added. In the following weeks, a lot changed. Thomas made a point of honoring all commitments. He paid off the garage's debts, invested in new equipment, and even helped renovate the apartment above the garage so Emily and Lucy could have more comfort. The red pickup truck was on display at the entrance, now with a plaque telling its story. People from the neighborhood stopped to take pictures, to hear the story of Joseph Wilson and Jack Johnson, two simple men who understood the true value of things. Thomas became a frequent visitor to the garage. At first he came only to check on the business, but soon he realized he enjoyed being there. He liked the smell of grease, the sound of tools, the simplicity of that place. One day he showed up with an old box. I found this in my mother's attic, he said to Emily. They're photos of my grandfather with the pickup truck. I think they should stay here. They arranged the photos on a board on the office wall, alongside the pictures of Emily's father. 2 generations, 2 families, connected by a simple red vehicle. Emily used part of the partnership money to start a project close to her heart, free mechanics classes for young people in the community, especially girls. She wanted to show that anyone could learn, anyone could fix, anyone could build. Thomas contributed to the project, not just financially, but personally. He would show up at the classes, tell his story, encourage the youth not to be ashamed of their roots. Old Walter, with his wife finally diagnosed and treated for a simple hormonal imbalance, returned to work with renewed energy. He loved teaching the new students, sharing decades of knowledge. Mrs. Helena became a constant presence at the garage, always bringing home-cooked meals, looking after Lucy when needed, or simply offering a word of encouragement. The garage grew and prospered, but never lost its essence. It continued serving the community with fair prices, remained a place where anyone was welcome, regardless of the car they drove or the clothes they wore. Lucy grew up happy and healthy, always with Duke by her side, always curious about engines and tools. Emily saw in her the same love for mechanics that her father had planted in her so many years ago. 3 months after the bet, on a sunny September afternoon, Emily was finishing up a job when Thomas showed up with a surprise. "There's something I want to show you," he said. He led her to the red pickup truck and opened the passenger door. From inside, he pulled out an old leather album. "My mother kept this all these years," he explained. "It's an album my grandfather maintained. It has pictures of him with the truck, receipts for work he did, notes about places he traveled to." Emily opened the album carefully. The yellowed pages told the story of Joseph Wilson through images and words. There were photos of him as a young man carrying bags of coffee, photos of him with the new truck, proudly standing beside his wife, photos of trips, deliveries, simple moments of an honest, hard-working life. "It's incredible," Emily murmured, turning the pages with reverence. "There's something here I think you'll like." Thomas pointed to a specific page. It was a photo of Joseph Wilson standing in front of a garage. And even though it was black and white and very old, Emily immediately recognized the place. It was right there, Johnson's garage. "Is this photo from when your grandfather met my father?" she asked. "No, it's from much earlier," Thomas said. "Look at the date on the back." Emily turned the photo over. 1975 was written in shaky handwriting. "I don't understand." "My father only opened the garage in 1982. "Exactly," Thomas smiled. "This wasn't your father's garage. It belonged to a man named Frank Coast. My grandfather used to come here to get the truck fixed. And who worked as an apprentice in that garage?" Emily felt a shiver. She knew the answer. "My father." "Your father," Thomas confirmed. "They met here, decades before you or I were born. My grandfather always said your father was the best mechanic he knew. When your father opened his own garage, my grandfather was one of his first customers." Emily felt tears welling up. "I never knew that." "Neither did I until I found this album. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Why do you think your father made that promise to take care of the truck? It wasn't just out of kindness. It was because he owed something to my grandfather, not in money, but in gratitude, in friendship." Emily looked at the red pickup truck with new eyes. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a link, a connection between generations, between families, between stories. "Your father could have sold this truck at any time," Thomas continued. "He could have used the money to pay off debts, to invest in the garage. But he didn't sell it because he understood its real value. It wasn't the value in dollars, it was the value of the story, the memory, the promise." "Yes," Emily agreed softly. "That's exactly what he understood." They stood there for a few minutes just looking at the pickup truck, each lost in thought. "You know," Thomas finally said, "I spent so much time trying to forget my origins, trying to build an image of success. But what I've learned in the past few weeks is that real success isn't about how much money you have or what kind of car you drive. It's about honoring where you came from, about keeping your promises, about treating people with respect." "My father used to say something similar." Emily smiled. "He said that a rich man is one who has friends, who has family, who can sleep peacefully at night knowing he was honest during the day. Your father was a wise man." He was. In the following months, the partnership between Emily and Thomas flourished. The garage became a reference in the region, not just for the quality of its services, but for the meaning it carried. It was a place where stories were shared, where connections were made, where the past was honored. Thomas gradually changed. He began to speak openly about his humble origins, about his grandfather, about the difficulties he faced. And he discovered something surprising. People respected him more for it, not less. He started using the story of the pickup truck in his talks and business meetings as a reminder that real success comes from honest work and keeping your promises. Emily, in turn, found a stability she had never had before. The debts were paid, the garage was growing, and she had time to be a mother without constant financial worry. But more importantly, she had honored her father's memory. She had kept the promise he couldn't fulfill. And in that process, she had found not only financial success, but something much more valuable: purpose and meaning. 1 year after the bet, the garage organized a special event. It was to celebrate Joseph Wilson's birthday, who would have turned 95. Thomas brought his whole family, mother, siblings, nephews. Emily invited the entire community. Old Walter and his wife, now fully recovered, were there. Mrs. Eleanor prepared a feast. Lucy, now 6 years old, ran happily among the people with Duke always behind her. The red pickup truck was decorated with colorful bunting. They had set up a small stage next to it where people could share stories. Thomas was the first to speak. "My grandfather, Joseph Wilson, was born into a poor family in rural Louisiana," he began, his voice clear and firm. "He barely had a formal education, but he had something no school could teach: character." The crowd listened quietly as Thomas told the story of his grandfather, of the hardships faced, of the dreams pursued, of the hard work that built everything. "And this pickup truck," he touched the hood of the vehicle, "was the beginning of it all. It was with this that my grandfather built our future, and when I, in a moment of desperation and shame, sold it, it was a simple, honest man named Jack Johnson who kept it for me." Emily felt tears streaming freely down her face. "Jack Johnson understood something it took me years to learn," Thomas continued, "that the true value of things isn't in the price they cost, but in the stories they carry, the lives they touch, the promises they represent." He turned to Emily. "And his daughter Emily taught me the final lesson. When she had every reason to despise me, to see me as just another arrogant client, she chose to honor her father's promise. She restored not just this pickup truck, but also my connection to my roots, to my grandfather, to myself." The crowd applauded. Emily had to wipe her eyes several times before she could step onto the stage. "My father always said that a person's life can be measured by the promises they keep," Emily began. "He made a promise over 20 years ago, and even after he passed, he left everything ready for that promise to be fulfilled." She looked at the pickup truck. "This truck could be seen as just a piece of old metal, but it's much more than that. It's proof that there are good people in the world, people who keep their word, who value stories more than money, who understand that some things are more important than profit." Emily paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I accepted Thomas's bet, I was desperate. I needed money. I was about to lose the garage. But during that impossible week, working day and night without stopping, I learned something important. I learned that I wasn't alone, that I had old Walter supporting me, Mrs. Eleanor taking care of my daughter, my father guiding me even after he was gone." She looked at the gathered people. "And I learned that community isn't just a place where you live. It's the people who support you in difficult times, who believe in you when you don't believe in yourself, who are there when you need them." The celebration continued late into the night. Stories were shared, laughter echoed through the yard, bonds were strengthened. In a quiet moment, Emily found Thomas standing alone by the pickup truck, just looking at it with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I was remembering the day I first arrived here," he said. "Arrogant, full of certainties, ready to mock everything. If someone had told me that this place, this truck, this bet would completely change my life, I would have laughed. But did it?" "It changed everything," he confirmed. "I spent so many years building walls around myself, trying to hide who I really was. But this truck broke down all those walls. It forced me to look at my past, at my choices, at the kind of man I had become. And what kind of man is that now?" Thomas thought for a moment. "A man who's trying to be better, who's learning that vulnerability isn't weakness, that humble origins aren't shameful, that keeping promises is worth more than any financial success." Emily smiled. "I think your grandfather would be proud." "I hope so." Thomas looked at the starry sky. "I hope that up there he and your father are laughing at how two stubborn people needed an old pickup truck to find the right path." Johnson's garage, with its red pickup truck permanently displayed at the entrance, became more than a business. It became a symbol in the community, a symbol of honesty, of hard work, of promises kept. Young people from the area attended free mechanics classes, many of them discovering themselves in a profession they had never considered. Emily made sure to tell the story of the pickup truck to every new student, so they understood that mechanics wasn't just about fixing cars, but about fixing lives, about building connections, about keeping your word. Thomas continued visiting regularly, but now he was no longer just an investor partner. He was a friend, a mentor, and sometimes even helped with the simplest tasks, rediscovering the pleasure of working with his hands. Old Walter, instead of thinking about retiring, found new energy. He loved teaching the young people, sharing stories of decades working with Jack Johnson, keeping alive the memory of a man who had understood the true value of things. Mrs. Eleanor became practically part of the family. She took care of Lucy when Emily needed, cooked for everyone, and offered grandmotherly advice that nobody had asked for but everyone needed. And Lucy grew up surrounded by love, stories, and examples of good people doing good things. She learned about engines, but also about integrity, about tools, but also about compassion, about mechanics, but also about humanity. Duke, the old golden retriever, who had been Joaquim Silva's companion, now divided his time between Emily and Lucy, always present, always faithful, as if he knew his mission was to protect and love that family. 2 years after the bet, on an ordinary workday, Emily was under a car when she heard familiar footsteps entering the garage. "Emily?" It was Thomas. "There's something I need to show you." She came out from under the car, wiping her hands. "What is it?" Thomas was holding an envelope with a mysterious smile on his face. "Remember I told you about that land I was trying to buy? To expand the company." "I remember. I'm not going to buy it." "No? Why?" "Because I had a better idea." He opened the envelope. "I'm going to buy that vacant lot next to the garage. Double the size you have now." Emily looked confused. "What for?" "To expand the garage," Thomas said simply, "and build a vocational training center, not just in mechanics but in various fields, carpentry, electrical work, plumbing, all free for the community." Emily was speechless. "Thomas, that will cost a fortune." "I have a fortune," he shrugged. "And what's the point of having money if I don't use it to do something that really matters?" "But—" "No buts," he interrupted. "This isn't charity. It's an investment. An investment in people, in community, in the future. My grandfather would have loved the idea. Your father would have loved it. And I need to do this, to honor them, to honor what they stood for." Emily hugged Thomas, surprised by this spontaneous display of affection, but he returned the hug. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." "I'm the one who should thank you," Thomas said, "for showing me the way back home, the way back to myself." The training center was built in the following months. Thomas made sure to be involved in every detail, ensuring it was accessible, welcoming, and functional. The opening was an even bigger event than Joseph Wilson's birthday celebration. Hundreds of people from the community attended, eager to see what had been built. The center was modern, but maintained the essence of Johnson's garage. There were classrooms, equipped workshops, a library, and on every wall photos and stories of Joseph Wilson and Jack Johnson. And right at the entrance, in a place of honor, a miniature replica of the red pickup truck, with a plaque explaining its history and significance. During the opening speech, Thomas brought his mother on stage. She was a 70-year-old lady with a gentle smile and eyes shining with pride. "This is my mother, Irene Wilson," Thomas introduced, "daughter of Joseph Wilson, guardian of his stories, and the woman who never let me completely forget where I came from, even when I tried." Irene took the microphone with slightly trembling hands. "My father," she began, her voice emotional, "used to say that a man's true wealth isn't in what he accumulates, but in what he builds. Not just houses or businesses, but relationships, memories, legacies." She looked at Thomas with love. "My son spent years trying to be someone he wasn't, ashamed of his roots. But my father always said the strongest tree is the one with deep roots. And thanks to Emily Johnson, thanks to that pickup truck that seemed like just an old piece of junk, my son finally found his roots again." She turned to the crowd. "This center isn't just about teaching trades. It's about teaching values. It's about showing that no matter where you come from, what matters is where you're going and how you get there. If you come with honesty, hard work, and integrity, you're already successful." The applause was deafening. The years passed. The training center graduated hundreds of young people, many of them securing stable jobs, some even starting their own businesses. Johnson's garage continued to thrive, always faithful to its principles of quality and honesty. Emily saw Lucy grow from a curious little girl into an intelligent and compassionate teenager. She still helped out at the garage, but she also developed other interests. She wanted to be an engineer, she wanted to design machines, she wanted to build things that helped people. "Where do you think you learned that?" Emily joked one day. "From Grandpa," Lucy replied simply. "Even though I never really knew him, I feel like I did. Through the stories, the photos, the pickup truck, he's in everything here." Thomas, who was visiting that day, overheard the conversation. "That's what legacy means," he said. "It's not about what we leave behind physically. It's about the values we pass on, the lives we touch, the seeds we plant. Your grandfather and my grandfather planted seeds that are still growing even decades later." That same day, Thomas had a surprise for Emily. "There's something I've been working on for a while," he said, pulling out his laptop. "I want to show you." On the screen, Emily saw the draft of a book, The Red Pickup Truck, A Story of Honesty, Hard Work and Promises, was the title. "I hired a writer to help document everything," Thomas explained. "The story of my grandfather, your father, the pickup truck, the bet, everything that happened. Not to glorify anyone, but to preserve the lessons we learned." Emily flipped through the preliminary pages with admiration. There were old photos, documents, interviews with people from the community. "It's beautiful," she said. "My father would be proud." "I hope so." "And the book's profits?" "They all go to the training center to make sure it keeps running for many years." The book was published months later and had unexpected success. It wasn't a national bestseller, but in the Sacramento region it became required reading. Schools adopted it as educational material, companies used it in ethics training, families shared it as inspiration. The story of the red pickup truck transcended the boundaries of a simple narrative about a vehicle or a bet. It became a modern parable about values, about what truly matters in life. 5 years after the original bet, on a winter morning, Emily was opening the garage when she saw an unfamiliar car parked out front. An elderly man got out with difficulty, leaning on a cane. "Can I help you?" Emily approached. The man looked at her, then at the red pickup truck on display, and his eyes filled with tears. "I know this truck," he said, his voice trembling. "Many years ago." Emily felt a shiver of curiosity. "Really? How?" "My name is Frank Coast. I owned the garage that was here before." Emily was stunned. He was the man from whom her father had learned mechanics, where Joseph Wilson had been a customer. "Mr. Coast, please come in. Let me make you some coffee." They sat in the small office, and Frank told stories from decades ago, of when Jack Johnson was just a young apprentice, but already showed exceptional talent. Of when Joseph Wilson would show up regularly with the red pickup truck, always punctual, always polite. "Your father," Frank said, looking at Emily with tear-filled eyes. "He was the best mechanic I ever knew, not just because he was skilled, but because he cared. Every car he fixed he treated as if it were the most important one in the world." "Thank you for telling me this," Emily said. "No, thank you for keeping his memory alive, for honoring what he built. When I heard about this place, about the story of the pickup truck, I had to come see it with my own eyes. Frank spent several hours there, sharing stories, laughing at old memories, sometimes crying. Before leaving, he touched the hood of the red pickup truck with reverence. "This pickup truck has seen generations pass by," he said. "It has seen good men live and depart. But its story continues because people like you and Thomas choose to keep promises, choose to honor the past, choose to do what's right even when it's hard." That visit was a reminder for Emily that the work she was doing went beyond the present. It was about preserving the past and building the future. 10 years after the bet, on a hot summer afternoon, Emily was teaching a basic mechanics class when Thomas showed up with news. "I have a proposal for you," he said after the class ended. "What kind of proposal?" "The State Education Network contacted me. They want to replicate our training center model in other cities. They're offering funds and support." Emily fell silent, processing. That would mean our story, the values we stand for, could help people across the state, Thomas continued. But I'll only accept if you agree. After all, you're a key part of all this. And the young people here, our community? Everything would stay the same here. In fact, it would improve. We'd have more resources, more teachers, more of everything. But the spirit, the values, all that would remain intact. Emily looked out the window at the red pickup truck, shining in the sun. My father always said we shouldn't keep good things just for ourselves. If we manage to learn something valuable, it's our duty to share it. So is that a yes? It's a yes. The expansion project started slowly, but with solid foundations. Each new center followed the same principles: free of charge, quality, and focus on values beyond technical skills. In each one there was a replica of the red pickup truck and the story of Joseph Wilson and Jack Johnson, not as idolatry, but as a reminder that great changes start with small gestures of honesty and kindness. Emily traveled to help implement each new center, taking Lucy with her whenever possible. It was important to her that her daughter saw the impact a simple promise, kept for decades, could have. Thomas used his influence and resources to ensure the centers had everything they needed, but never put his name in the spotlight. He had learned that true legacy doesn't need plaques or public recognition. 15 years after the bet, in a special ceremony, the state governor came personally to Johnson's garage to acknowledge the impact of the training centers. Thousands of young people had already graduated, many completely changing their life paths. This initiative, the governor said in his speech, shows that true social change doesn't come from top to bottom, but from ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Emily Johnson and Thomas Wilson proved that when we combine resources with purpose, when we honor our promises, when we genuinely care about our community, we can change the world, one life at a time. Emily, now 45 years old, with strands of grey hair beginning to appear, stood beside Thomas, who also showed the signs of the years, but with a more genuine smile and kinder eyes than on that morning 15 years ago, when he had first arrived at the garage. "Who would have thought," he murmured to her, "that a silly bet would change everything?" "It wasn't the bet," Emily replied. "It was the choice to do what was right even when it was hard." Lucy, now a 20-year-old woman studying mechanical engineering at university, watched her mother with pride. She had decided to continue the family legacy, but in her own way, combining the love for engines with knowledge of modern technology. Old Walter, now 80 years old but still active in the garage, approached Emily. "Your father would be proud of you," he said, giving a paternal pat on her shoulder. "You not only kept his promise, you built something much bigger." Emily looked around, seeing the garage full of people, of life, of purpose. "No, old Walter, we built it, all of us. You, Mrs. Eleanor, Thomas, every person who believed, who helped, who cared. This isn't the work of one person. It's the work of a community." Mrs. Eleanor, now 85 but still making her hot meals, joined the conversation. "You know what I find most beautiful in all this?" she said. "It's that the story continues. The red pickup truck is here, the lessons are being passed down, and lives keep being transformed. That's true immortality. The celebration went on for the rest of the day. Stories were shared, bonds strengthened, hopes renewed. When everyone finally left and night fell over the garage, Emily stood there alone for a few minutes, just her and the red pickup truck. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, touching the vehicle's hood. "For teaching me what really matters. For showing me that a promise is worth more than gold. For giving me the tools, literal and figurative, to build something meaningful." The night wind blew gently, rustling the tree leaves, and Emily could have sworn that for a moment she felt her father's presence there, proud, at peace, knowing that his promise not only was kept, but flourished into something far beyond what he could have imagined. She went into the apartment, where Lucy was making tea. "Thinking about Grandpa?" her daughter asked. "Always," Emily smiled. "And about your great-grandfather too. Two men who never met each other in the end, but who through a simple red vehicle taught generations about what truly matters." "I think I'll write my thesis about this," Lucy said, "about how seemingly worthless objects can carry stories that change lives. Your grandfather and great-grandfather would have loved that. Mother and daughter sat together, drinking tea, sharing dreams and plans for the future. Outside, the red pickup truck remained in its place of honor, a silent beacon reminding all who passed by of values that transcend generations. 20 years after the bet, Emily was training a new group of young people when one of them, a 17-year-old boy named Gabriel, asked a question. "Emily, why do you do this? I mean, you could charge for these courses. You could be making a lot more money. Why give them for free?" Emily stopped what she was doing and looked at the group of young people gathered around her. "Because 20 years ago," she began, "I was desperate, about to lose everything. I made a bet that seemed impossible to win. But during that week, I learned something important." She approached the red pickup truck, the young people following her. "I learned that nothing of value is built alone. That community means mutual support, that some promises are worth more than any amount of money, and that when you receive help, in whatever form, your responsibility is to pay it forward." "That's what your father did," Gabriel said. "Took care of the pickup truck even though he could have sold it." "Exactly. And when I finally understood why he did it, why he kept that promise for so many years, everything changed for me. It wasn't about me or my problems anymore, it was about something bigger." She touched the hood of the pickup truck. This pickup truck could have been lost in time. It could have gone to the junkyard, turned into meaningless scrap. But because two people, separated by decades, chose to honor a promise, it became a symbol of something much greater. "And now it's inspiring people like us," a young woman named Bethany added. "Yes. And when you leave here, when you learn a trade, when you build your lives, I hope you remember this, that you pass it on, that you make your own promises and keep them, that you build legacies not of wealth, but of character." The group fell silent for a moment, absorbing the words. That conversation was repeated hundreds of times over the years. Each new group of students heard the story, learned the lessons, and left not just with technical skills, but with a renewed moral compass. Thomas, now in his 60s and officially retired from the active management of his company, devoted most of his time to the training centers. He had found a purpose that money had never been able to give. One day he was showing the original center to a group of visitors from another city when one of them asked, "Mr. Wilson, what motivated you to invest so much time and money in this project?" Thomas looked at the red pickup truck before answering. "I spent the first half of my life trying to forget where I came from. I built a successful company, accumulated wealth, achieved status, but it was empty. I was empty." He paused. "Then a stubborn young mechanic showed me this pickup truck that I had sold decades ago in a time of desperation, and she forced me to face everything I had tried to bury, my origins, my family, my lost values." "And that changed everything?" "It changed everything," Thomas confirmed. "It made me realize that real success isn't measured in a bank account. It's measured in the impact you have on people's lives, in the promises you keep, in the legacy you build." He smiled. This pickup truck, which seemed worthless, was actually precious. Not for the metal or the mechanics, but for what it represented. And it taught me that the same goes for people. Everyone has value, everyone has potential, regardless of appearance or origin. My work now is to help people discover that value. 25 years after the bet, Johnson's Garage celebrated its 50th anniversary, half a century since Jack Johnson had first opened its doors with nothing but talent, integrity, and a dream to serve his community. The celebration was grand. Alumni from the training centers came from all over the state to share their success stories. Business owners, teachers, engineers, all had passed through there and carried with them the lessons of that place. Emily, now with grayer hair and laugh lines around her eyes, stood on stage next to Lucy, who was about to graduate and already planning to open her own automotive technology company. 50 years, Emily said into the microphone. Half a century of stories, of repaired cars, of lives touched. My father started with almost nothing, but he built something that transcended generations. She looked at the crowd. And you know what's most impressive? That he never sought fame or fortune. He just wanted to do honest work, treat people with respect, and keep his promises. These simple principles became the foundation of everything you see here today. Lucy took the microphone. I never met my grandfather personally. I was only 1 year old when he passed away, but I feel like I know him intimately because he's in everything here, in every tool, in every story, in every life this place has touched. She pointed to the red pickup truck, and he's especially there. In that pickup truck that he kept for decades, honoring a promise that many would have forgotten. That's the true measure of a man, not what he does when everyone is watching, but the promises he keeps when no one would know if he broke them. The applause was long and sincere. Thomas, sitting in the front row next to his mother Irene, now 95 but still lucid and present, stood up. "May I say something?" he asked. Emily Johnson waved for him to come up on stage. "You all know my story," Thomas Wilson began. "How I came here 25 years ago as an arrogant man who thought money defined value. How Emily and this pickup truck taught me otherwise." He looked at his mother. "But there's a part of the story I've never told publicly. In the years before coming here I was lost. I had money, I had success, but I was deeply unhappy. My marriage was falling apart. My relationship with my family was cold. I couldn't sleep at night." Thomas paused, clearly emotional. "I was seriously considering giving up on everything. I won't go into details, but I was in a very dark place. And then I came here, made that silly bet, and Emily showed me something that saved my life." There was absolute silence in the crowd. She showed me that I wasn't empty because I was missing something external. I was empty because I had abandoned my values, my roots, my truth. And when I reconnected with all that, when I embraced where I came from and used my resources for something meaningful, I found purpose again. He looked at Emily with evident gratitude. "So when I thank you and your father, it's not just for keeping a pickup truck or teaching a lesson. It's for literally saving my life." Emily hugged Thomas, both with tears in their eyes, as the crowd applauded. That revelation added new depth to the already powerful story. Many people in the crowd were struggling with their own battles, feeling lost or worthless. Thomas's honesty gave hope to all of them. After the celebration, when night had fallen and most had left, Emily found his mother, Irene Wilson, sitting alone next to the red pickup truck. "Mrs. Wilson," Emily approached, "may I keep you company?" "Please." The elderly woman patted the seat beside her. They sat in silence for a few moments, just looking at the pickup truck. "My father," Irene finally said, "used to take me in this pickup truck when I was a child. I'd sit here in the middle, between him and my mother, and we'd travel through Northern California making deliveries." She smiled at the memory. "They were long trips, bad roads. Sometimes we'd spend the whole day on the road. But I loved it. My father told stories, sang songs, taught about life and values." "He sounds like he was a wonderful man," Emily said. "He was. And you know what he always said? That this pickup truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was a partner, a family member. He took care of it with affection, talked to it." Irene laughed. "People thought he was crazy, but he said that things we love deserve respect and care." She touched the hood of the pickup truck with a trembling hand. "When he got sick and we saw he wasn't going to get better, he made me promise to take care of it. But I didn't know about mechanics. I didn't have a place to keep such a big vehicle. That's when Thomas, who was young and taking over the family business, said he was going to sell it. That must have been hard for you." "It was devastating," Irene admitted. "It felt like we were betraying my father's memory. But Thomas was right about one thing. We needed the money. So I agreed, but I made Thomas promise he'd sell it to someone who would take good care of it. And he chose my father." "I don't know if he chose or if it was fate," Irene smiled. "But it was the best thing that could have happened. Your father not only took care of the pickup truck, he honored my father's memory in a way I never could." Emily felt a tightness in her chest. "My father never talked to me about this," she said. "About how the pickup truck came to him, about the promise he made. I only found out all this through the letters I discovered. He probably didn't want you to feel obligated," Irene said wisely. It was his promise, not yours, but you chose to honor it anyway. That says a lot about who you are. The two women stood there for a few more minutes, sharing stories, connected by a red vehicle that had witnessed decades of history. 30 years after the bet, Emily decided it was time to pass the torch. Lucy, now a successful engineer with her own company, returned to officially take over the management of the garage and the original training center. It was a smooth transition. Emily wasn't retiring completely, but she wanted time to travel, to visit the other centers spread across the state, to dedicate herself to writing a book expanding the lessons learned over the decades. At the handover ceremony, mother and daughter stood side by side in front of the red pickup truck. "This pickup truck," Emily said, "it has seen 3 generations of the Wilson family and 3 generations of the Johnson family. It has seen good men live and pass on. It has seen dreams born and fulfilled. It has seen promises made and kept." She turned to Lucy. "And now it sees a 4th generation taking over. With you leading, I'm sure the next 30 years will be even more impactful than the last." Lucy hugged her mother. "I'll do my best to honor everything you and Grandpa built. I know you will. And don't forget, it's not about perfection. It's about intention, about effort, about keeping your promises even when it's hard." Thomas, now clearly elderly but still present and active, approached. "Emily," he said, "there's one thing I want to do before you step back." "What is it?" "I want to officially transfer the ownership of the pickup truck to you. Legally, technically, it's still registered in my name. But that never made sense. It belongs to you, to your family, to this place." Emily shook her head. "No, Thomas. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to the community. Let's keep it as it is, a shared symbol, no one's property." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Some things are too big to have a single owner. They are the heritage of everyone touched by them." That decision perfectly symbolized what the pickup truck had become. Not an object, but an ideal. Not a possession, but a shared legacy. The years kept passing. Emily wrote her book, which became recommended reading in business schools and leadership development programs. Not for the mechanics, but for the lessons on values, integrity, and the true meaning of success. Lucy took the garage and the training center to new heights, incorporating modern technologies without losing the essence that made it special. She developed online programs, partnerships with universities, and expanded the reach of the work, started by her grandfather and continued by her mother. Thomas spent his final years doing what he loved, talking to young people, sharing his story, inspiring others to reconnect with their values. He passed away at 78, in peace, surrounded by family, knowing he had used his second chance in life to do something truly meaningful. His funeral was held at the garage, next to the red pickup truck. Hundreds of people attended, each with a story of how Thomas had impacted their lives. Emily, now 65, gave the eulogy. "Thomas Wilson could have been remembered as a successful businessman who accumulated wealth," she said. "But he chose to be remembered as a man who learned to use his wealth to enrich others, who had the courage to admit he was wrong, to change, to grow." She looked at the pickup truck. "He once told me that this pickup truck saved his life, and in a way it did. But it wasn't the pickup truck itself. It was the choice to honor what it represented. It was the decision to reconnect with his roots, to embrace his origins, to use his success to lift others up." "Thomas lived 2 lives," Emily continued. "The first, seeking recognition and accumulating wealth. The second, after learning the lessons from this pickup truck, seeking meaning and building a legacy. The second life, though shorter, was infinitely richer. Thomas Wilson's funeral was just the beginning of a new phase. His family established a foundation in his name, dedicated to continuing the work of the training centers and promoting free vocational education across the country. The red pickup truck remained in its place, now with a new plaque also telling Thomas's story. Not just as Joseph Wilson's grandson, but as a man who found redemption and purpose through a simple vehicle. 40 years after the original bet, Emily Johnson was sitting in her apartment reviewing the memories of a life well lived. Lucy had given her a grandson, Gabriel, who at 5 years old already showed the same fascination for engines that 3 generations before him had shown. She watched through the window as the boy played in the garage's yard, always under Lucy's watchful eye. The red pickup truck was there, as always, a silent witness to another generation growing up in its shadow. Emily often thought of her father now. The memories had softened with time, but the love and gratitude remained intense. "Dad," she said softly, even knowing he wasn't there to hear. "I hope you're proud. I hope you're up there with Joseph Wilson, Thomas, and all the others, seeing what that promise you made became." She smiled. "I never imagined when I accepted that bet 40 years ago that it would change not only my life but thousands of lives, that a simple pickup truck would become a symbol of integrity, of values, of community." A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Mrs. Eleanor, now an impressive 105 years old, fragile but still lucid. "I came to see how you are," the elderly woman said, entering slowly with the help of a walker. "Mrs. Eleanor." Emily helped her sit down. "You always surprise me with your energy." "Energy?" Mrs. Eleanor laughed. "My dear, at my age, it's stubbornness, not energy. But I couldn't die without seeing the 50th anniversary of the bet. That's 10 years from now." "I know," Mrs. Eleanor winked. "That's why I need to stay alive. I want to be there." The two laughed, the kind of laugh that only decades of friendship can produce. "You know," Mrs. Eleanor said, "I remember that night 40 years ago when you showed up at my door asking for help with Lucy. You were so desperate, so tired. I remember too. You saved my life that week." "No, dear. I just did what neighbors should do." "The one who saved your life was yourself, when you decided not to give up, when you worked nights on end, when you chose to honor your father's promise." Emily took the elderly woman's hand. "Thank you for everything, for all these years of friendship, of support, of love." "No need to thank me. Seeing you grow, seeing Lucy grow, seeing this place flourish, is more than enough payment." Mrs. Eleanor stayed for another hour, sharing stories and memories, before going back home with the help of a niece. That night Emily had a dream. She was back in that week 40 years ago, working on the pickup truck, exhausted and desperate. But this time, when she looked up, she saw not only Duke by her side, but also her father, Joseph Wilson, Thomas, Frank Coast, all the men who had been part of that story. They didn't say anything, just smiled and waved, approving, thanking, blessing. When she woke up, Emily had tears in her eyes, but they were tears of peace and contentment. She had fulfilled her mission. She had honored not only her father's promise, but a whole lineage of honesty and integrity. 45 years after the bet, something special happened. Gabriel, the grandson of Emily, now 10 years old, expressed a serious interest in learning mechanics. "Grandma," he said one day, "I want to learn everything about the red pickup truck. I want to know how my great-grandfather restored it." Emily, now 70 years old, but still active and sharp, smiled. "Why this sudden interest?" "Because in school during history class, the teacher was talking about legacies, about how one person's actions can affect generations, and I thought, our family has an amazing legacy, and I want to be part of it." Emily hugged her grandson tightly. It was the 4th generation embracing the story, choosing to continue the legacy. "Then let's begin," she said. "But first, you need to learn the whole story, not just the mechanics, but the meaning." In the following months, Emily spent countless hours with Gabriel, teaching not only about engines and tools, but about values and principles. She told stories of Jack Johnson, of Joseph Wilson, of Thomas, of all the people who were part of that journey. Gabriel absorbed everything like a sponge, asking smart questions, showing not only technical curiosity, but also emotional and moral depth. "Grandma," he asked one day, "if you could go back in time and not accept that bet, would you do it differently?" Emily thought carefully before answering. "No." Even knowing how hard it was, even knowing the suffering of that week, I would accept it again. Because that bet wasn't just about a pickup truck. It was about discovering who I really was, about honoring my father, about building something bigger than myself. So the suffering was worth it. Suffering is part of life, Gabriel. What matters is what we do with it. Whether we use it as an excuse to give up or as fuel to grow. That conversation was recorded by Lucy, who was documenting everything for a documentary about the history of the garage and the pickup truck. The film would be released on the 50th anniversary of the bet. Preparations for this celebration began 2 years in advance. It would be a monumental event, bringing together former students from all the training centers, family members of everyone involved in the story, and authorities recognizing the social impact of the work. Emily, although excited about the celebration, felt a certain weight. 50 years was a long time. So many things had changed. So many important people had passed away. She felt mortality weighing more heavily each day, but there was also deep satisfaction. She had lived a meaningful life. She had kept promises. She had built legacies. She had touched lives. Not many could say the same. On the day of the 50th anniversary of the bet, the garage was unrecognizable. Decorations everywhere. A stage set up, giant screens for presentations. Thousands of people attended, including the current governor and several mayors of cities where the training centers operated. Emily, now 75 years old and using a cane for support, stood on stage alongside 4 generations of her family. Lucy, Gabriel, and even her new great-granddaughter Sophie, just 2 years old, in her mother's arms. 50 years, Emily said into the microphone, her voice still clear and strong. Half a century since an arrogant man parked his imported car in this garage and changed my life forever. The crowd laughed. I was young then, desperate, about to lose everything. I accepted a bet that seemed impossible, driven by pride and need. But what seemed like my ruin became my salvation. She pointed to the red pickup truck, now under spotlights, shining as on the first day after the restoration. This pickup truck taught generations about the true value of things. It taught that stories matter more than appearances, that promises kept are worth more than accumulated wealth, that community is stronger than individualism. Emily took a pause, her eyes scanning the crowd. My father, Jack Johnson, kept a promise for over 20 years. Thomas Wilson, who started as my antagonist, became my greatest ally and friend. Together, we built something that transcended our individual lives. She turned to Lucy. And now, I see my daughter continuing this work with the same integrity and passion. I see my grandson embracing the legacy. I see my great-granddaughter, who, without even knowing it, is already part of this story. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years and the magnitude of the moment. Life teaches us many lessons, but the most important one I've learned is this: we are merely temporary guardians of stories that are bigger than us. Our responsibility is to honor them, preserve them, and pass them on to the next generations. The applause was deafening. Emily saw tears on many faces in the crowd, people moved by the story, the journey, the legacy. When the event finally ended, late at night, Emily stayed alone in the yard for a few minutes. She approached the red pickup truck and placed her hand on the hood, still warm from the spotlights. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything you represented, for all the lives you touched, for giving me purpose when I needed it most." The night wind blew gently, carrying with it the scent of the flowers from Mrs. Eleanor's garden, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep a few weeks earlier, at 106 years old. Emily smiled through her tears. Mrs. Eleanor had gotten her wish, to live to see the 50th anniversary. "It's all complete now," Emily said to the silent night. "The story is complete. The legacy is safe. I can finally rest knowing I did what I needed to do." She returned to the apartment, where Lucy was putting the children to bed. "Mom," Lucy said, "it was a beautiful day. Grandpa would be so proud." "He is proud," Emily corrected. "Wherever he is proud. Just as I am proud of you, of Gabriel, of everything we built together." Mother and daughter hugged, a long, tight embrace, full of love and gratitude. That night, Emily slept deeply for the first time in years. No worries, no anxieties, just peace. The red pickup truck remained in its place of honor, a beacon in the night, reminding all who passed by of the power of promises kept, of honest work, and of love that transcends generations. And so ends the story of a bet that changed lives, of a pickup truck that became a symbol, of promises that were kept through generations. But so begins the next chapter, because truly meaningful stories never really end. They just continue, evolving with each new generation that chooses to honor the legacy left by those who came before. Johnson's Garage continues operating to this day, as do dozens of training centers spread across Brazil, all with a replica of the red pickup truck at their entrance. Thousands of young people have been trained, hundreds of lives transformed, countless families impacted. And it all started with a silly bet, an impossible week, and the choice of a young mechanic to honor her father's promise, even when it seemed impossible. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Would you have taken that bet? Have you ever had to honor a difficult promise? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. If you liked it, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartfelt stories we've prepared with care.